And boom, according to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. Sorry to keep you waiting there. I was just trying to do some setup stuff. And yeah, the settings on my streaming capture where you can see the screen being captured there, that was getting refreshed. The streaming software was getting refreshed. Also, I have set up the old iPad connected so that I could hopefully do some music live tonight. Now, I was just checking if the settings for that were working. And they don't seem to be. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but I might do an outro. Of course, we've got the World Cup tonight. It's December 18, 2022. And yes, 1 week to Christmas, I guess. This time next week will be Christmas. Given that it's not that big a deal here and it'll be late at night, I probably will do a show next week. But of course, we've also got the World Cup Grand Final later tonight, France versus Argentina, which should be a good game. I think that starts at midnight Japan time. It's so 1.5 hours from now, I guess 1 hour and 20 minutes from now, since I took a bit of time to get started. I hope that you're all doing well. Never fear, Shubus is here. Good to see that, Shubus, you've made it in, our man from Panama. Who else we got in here? We've got Quint Ragged. Good to see you. First in the chat. Odie Jr., boom diggity. Boom, boom, diggity. Indeed, I see that from Odie Jr. Good to see you. As standard, that's right. Technical issues are the mirroring is how I get my iPad here. Which I'm showing on the screen. You can see it's pretty good. But it's all wireless and whatever. And I put it onto a monitor and I capture off the monitor. That's how I show what's on screen during the show. DJ Sunnyside Up, great to see you. Beautiful people indeed. Good to see everybody. 5 people in the chat. Boom, just uploaded your Instagram $5 first place rap challenge Christmas gift. Giving back. Cool. I should check that out. I like the last one actually. So yeah, I've been sort of running around doing lots of things today. In terms of what's going on in my life, more progress where we've kicked off the immigration process to get over to America. Don't know how long it's going to take. I'm hearing it's still taking a while lately, but I'm hoping I'll get there. Yeah, the idealist in me thinks late January, but probably the realist says it'll be mid-February. But if you're in or around Seattle, I will hopefully be there in February. And I'm really looking forward to spending some proper time over there. So, it'd be cool to meet up in Seattle, of course. And looking forward to, experiencing life in a different country for the first time in a long time, actually. Going on 24 years. By the time I go there in March, it'll be 24 years in Japan. So, it's been a long time. And excited about that. I've also been talking on Twitter a little bit, sounding people out on the idea of January 21st as a date for a tweet up, assuming I don't get to America before that. So let me have a drink. Pardon me, it's very dry at the moment, and I don't really notice it until I start talking like this. It often happens on the show. I'm sounding people out on the idea of doing a January 21st meetup. That or January 15, but I figure January 15 people are still coming back from their Christmas vacations and settling into the new year, and there are all these new year parties and everything everywhere. So thinking January 21 is probably the ideal date. Of course, not everybody can make it, but interesting seeing reactions. It's one of those things where I think off the top of my head, hey, it'd be nice to do a meetup, and I guess just go get a table at a bar and say hello and have a chat with the 10 or so people that will show up. However, I'm kind of getting a reminder. It's nice. On the one hand, I don't want to be so arrogant as to presume that lots and lots of people will come. But there again, when you plan for a small event and lots of people come, that kind of makes it unworkable. And I'm noticing through reactions on Twitter that probably if I did do one, quite a few people would show up. And that is wonderful. But it also then reminds me, I've attended tweet ups of people like Noah Smith and some other sort of famous internet commentators. And yeah, in that sort of a situation when there are dozens of people, and it's actually even the same with the YouTube meetups. It's but particularly when it's an event which you set up to meet up with people yourself, is that you basically never get a chance to really have a good conversation with everybody. If you try to, you're gonna miss other people basically. So you end up having a lot of very short conversations, and I guess that's where it's better in a way to have a YouTube meetup where everybody's there to sort of meet each other. And in that way, you actually get to, maybe have some more quiet conversations, and it's not all about you. But yeah, I'm getting a reminder. Perhaps there will be a lot of people, and that means I'll have to be a little bit strategic about how we do it. But again, there's good interest in it. There'll be people around. So yeah, if you are in Tokyo or able to be in Tokyo, it does look like January 21st. I'm thinking off the top of my head, Tokyo Sports Cafe, just since I've developed a good thing with the owner there, provided it still is the same owner. Hoping that if they open a bit early, we should be able to get, it's a large enough place, you can sit there pretty comfortably, and should be good. There again, if it looks like there's going to be a lot of people, I've been to other tweet ups which have been in larger bars and like sports bars and stuff like that. So maybe that'll be the go. I'll think about it. But yeah, just a quick reminder that if you are going to be in Tokyo, probably like late afternoon, like 4 o'clock-ish, generally when bars open on the, ideally even earlier, just partly because you want to go there when it's quiet, not during the rush period. But I'll probably look for early afternoon to mid-afternoon, January 21st in Tokyo, probably somewhere in Roppongi. It's central. There's lots of places to choose from. I'll probably do something like that. And yeah, it'll be nice to do a meetup just to see some humans. So if you can do that, I'll definitely look forward to doing that with all of you. Yeah, we've got John Carlo Lanoy, good to see you. We've got DJ Sunny set up saying going surfing next Sunday till Tuesday, Christmas surf. Want to come? I would love to go. I've got to work, unfortunately, but that sounds like a lot of fun. And this is in Shikoku, right? So yeah, it won't be as cold as it is up here, although I think it's pretty cold down there as well right now. What kind of wetsuit are you wearing? That'll be like a 5mm. Up here it'd be a 5mm. I guess if the water's a little bit warmer than down there, you might be able to get away with a 3mm. But yeah, that sounds like it'll be pretty intense. Although yeah, I'm jealous. And yeah, Tokyo 503, assuming that this is the last Tokyo Tonight of 2022, wishing a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Yeah, it might not be the last one of the year. I might do a quiet show next week. We'll see how we go. We're not particularly, making a big deal of Christmas in this house or religious or anything like that. So, yeah, we'll probably do something. But there again, I expect all of you are probably going to be busy, so there might very well be a solo stream. And this time of year as well, the views and so on go down, and people tend to be doing other things, which is as it should be. But indeed, if I do call it off at the last minute, which is possible, there is a possibility. I'm getting my 4th vaccination on Friday, and I've had 3 Moderna. I'm going to get a Pfizer this time. I figure if I'm going to go to America, where I don't see how I'm going to be able to not get it. I haven't had it so far, but everyone I've talked to from America has had it like multiple times, and I don't want to get into a serious medical situation in any way when I'm in America. It's just one of the things I want to avoid all the time when I'm over there. So for all of those reasons, I will be getting fully vaccinated before I go. So that's a big reason I decided to get that this week, which means I may possibly still be feeling like crap. Generally, it's like the next day after the vaccine that you get a fever and stuff like that. So we'll see. I may quit next week if I'm feeling like crap, but I should be okay by then. So that should be pretty cool. Hi from Norfolk Airport. Where is Norfolk Airport? Like, I assume you don't mean like Norfolk Island, like in between Australia and New Caledonia. Where is Norfolk Airport? You're like on the east coast of the US, right? Which means, again, it's super early for you, I think. Very glad that you made it, Aaron. Great to see you. Yeah, glad that you made it in. Look at that. DJ Sunny side up 3mm. There we go, with a rash guard, tights, and a hoodie. But okay, so there we go. The water's not too bad. It's a COVID vaccine buffet. Yeah, I've heard it's okay to mix it, and they're both RNA vaccines, so I'm hoping that'll do the trick. John Carlo Lanoy, do Japanese celebrate Christmas even if they're not Christians? Yes and no. Not like. Yeah, Christmas is a bit weird here. It's a eat Kentucky Fried Chicken, and you celebrate it on Christmas Eve, and it's kind of marketed as a date night, like an extra Valentine's Day. So it's not really like a Christian Christmas, although they take some of the trappings of the commercial movie Christmas. It's the movie Christmas that really catches on here, although that's probably how it is. Yeah, over honestly, probably most Western countries as well. I mean, yeah, it's more of the movie Christmas than a real Christian Christmas, but still, it's okay. DJ Sunny said up, wife and daughter have had corona and you never got it, counting your blessings. Yeah, it sounds like you've been lucky. I've heard of similar cases like that. Also, it's possible that you just get it and don't get symptoms, which also seems to happen, which in a way is the best way because that means you've probably got some immunity from it as well. Virginia, Chesapeake Bay, 8:49 a.m. Doing well there. Wow, at the airport. Are you flying away somewhere? Safe travels if that's what you're doing. 8:50 a.m. on the east coast of the US right now. So, okay, pretty reasonable for the east coast. It does remind me that, yes, that's right. This is like 5:30 a.m. in the west coast where I'm going to be. So I'm going to have to think about that. I might have to move the show Sunday morning. Am I going to be able to do this Sunday morning? This is like my Sunday night routine. I might switch to doing the Sunday night US time, which means, yeah, which even then for East Coast, I guess means I'll do it later. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out what I'm going to do, but still pretty good. So anyway, those are all the updates. There's still, meet up in January if you're in Tokyo. So do follow my Twitter and more details to come for that. And if you're in Seattle or knowledgeable of Seattle, would love to meet or just get info on good things to do when I'm over there. -1 now in Kochi. Yeah, that sucks. Although I guess the water isn't as bad. I mean, yeah, the black current, the Kuroshio, runs up to like the bottom half of Chiba. Above that, the water is freezing, and below that, it's noticeably like 5 degrees different temperature, which I remember from surfing in winter. It's you can surf in Chiba, but not like in Ibaraki, unless you're really into it. But yeah, and the wind would be pretty awful right now as well. I guess that'd be the worst thing. When you get used to the water, you sit in the water, and the worst thing is coming out of the water, not being in the water. Because of course your wetsuit hits you up. But yeah, damn, nice being in Kochi, I guess. Let's dive into the topics. I know I started a bit late there. One thing I'm just excited about, small thing, but I really loved my Nike Vaporfly Zoom, which are like the Olympic, running, like the cheat shoes that add 10% to your time because they've got a carbon plate inside the shoes that gives you extra spring. I've been wearing those, and they're great. And I wanted to get another pair custom made. But I couldn't get them custom made, and they're also kind of weirdly shaped shoes. They're not really like casual shoes that you just wear around. And so I figure if I'm going to America, again, just thinking ahead a little bit and thinking that I'll want shoes I can go running in and shoes that I can wear casually instead of have multi-purpose shoes and cut down on what I take. I thought it'd be good to get some running shoes that, sort of fit casual use as well. So I got, and plus you can custom make the Pegasus 39 regular running shoes from Nike. So yeah, I did this design myself, kind of the same colors, I guess, that I'm always picking like with my keyboard and stuff like that. But I quite like them, not too loud or anything like that, but still a little bit flashy. Kustos, good to have you in here. Very happy with these. Looking forward to these coming and seeing how they compare. I've always been a New Balance shoe guy, and they are super comfortable, just as like sneakers. And in high school, I ran in New Balance shoes, actually the same 574s, the same shoes that I just wear casually now to work. However, they are a bit like clogs. They are heavy and a bit old-fashioned nowadays. Never really liked Nike shoes, but I really love my Vaporflies. So yeah, I guess they've made me a fan. I bought a pair of regular Pegasus shoes, and I'll see how they go. But I'm looking forward to getting these soon. Waiting for them to get shipped over from America. What do we got next? Boom. I don't know if anyone saw this. I just saw this. Like, I'm subscribed to Funny or Die channel on among my many subscriptions that I just watch stuff randomly from YouTube, and I saw this whole TV series. It's a Paramount Plus original, which I don't subscribe to, but the whole thing came up for free on YouTube. All episodes, like all 10 or 11 episodes of the first season. It's called Players. And it's kind of done in a documentary style, and it's kind of a comedy, and honestly, it's extremely cringe in the beginning and pretty much through the whole season to some extent, but it's about a professional League of Legends team. And I watched the whole thing. It just came up randomly in my YouTube stuff, and I started watching the episodes. They're like 30 minutes each, so it's quite watchable. And it's really, really good. I can't recommend it enough. I am not a League of Legends fan or player. I know of the game. I know it's a huge esports game. I've seen documentaries, real life documentaries on it before. But you learn a ton about the game. The way that they show completely irredeemable, annoying characters and have them kind of go into a redemption arc, but not redeem themselves entirely. It was a really, really great, enjoyable series. It's something that I just enjoyed. So I watched this whole thing this week pretty much in one hit. It looks like it actually started streaming in June, and maybe it didn't get so much attention, so they decided to dump it on YouTube. I don't know, but it's really good. I highly recommend it. That's been a fun thing to watch. Um, yeah, what else have I got in here? This is, oh yeah, in Akihabara, the quintessential Osaka-Tokyo problem. As you probably know if you live pretty much anywhere in Japan other than Osaka, the general social rule in Japan is that when you've got these double escalators, you stand on the left and the right is like a passing lane where, the idea is that the right hand side is for people who want to walk up the escalator and the left hand side is for people who want to stand still. And this is, as we've talked about on the show before, a source of frequent conflict because you'll occasionally get that maniac who's late for work who'll be running up the stairs, and there'll be someone either walking very slowly or standing or with lots of like luggage or a suitcase or whatever that they're sticking out into the right hand side, and they'll trip or they'll push someone out of the way, and there'll be injuries sometimes of people getting pushed over. Sometimes there'll be fights, and this has become enough of a recurring problem in train stations that in Tokyo, and I've heard in other parts of Japan, the train station companies have started putting up signs asking people to please stand on both sides, because having the passing lane causes people to feel entitled, like they have a right of way, like they're allowed to push people who are standing in that lane, and it's causing conflict. So they're asking people to avoid to basically bunch up by standing in both lanes, rather than having everybody standing on using half the elevator and having the other line being an aggro line. And although there have been all of these posters, it's a bit like masks. Even though the government's saying, hey, you don't have to wear masks outside anymore, the social norm attached to doing it and the kind of pressure and judgment you'll get if you contradict it, and the fear of being the odd person out is still definitely there in Japanese society, that at least in Tokyo, everyone is still wearing masks. And in elevators, in spite of all the posters, people still follow the norm. However, big thing here, in Osaka only, for some reason, they decided to do it the other way around. They do it where the passing lane is on the left rather than the right. I think that the standing on the left and the passing lane being on the right, that is consistent with the Japanese drive, like road rules. Japanese drive, of course, on the left-hand side. So, yeah, and the passing lane is on the right. So Osaka, for some reason, follows like US rules. And so occasionally you'll get a problem where you'll get someone from Osaka in Tokyo who just happens to be standing on the wrong side of the elevator, not realizing that they're not following the norm here. However, the news story in this case is that, yes, apparently in Akihabara station, an 80-something-year-old man was standing on the wrong side of the elevator, and a 61-year-old person went and beat him up, shoved him over, caused him to be hospitalized, and was arrested. Basically arrested for assault. And lots of people pointing out in the comments that, maybe the only way to fix this is to have two single-lane escalators rather than a double lane. The only way they're ever going to get people to feel comfortable just standing still on an escalator is not having a two-person escalator. Some other suggestions and comments here. There are some people saying that if you really want to walk up the stairs, use the stairways, not the escalator. It adds to the danger too much. Some people pointing out in Rio de Janeiro, in this case, people just stand in the middle of the escalator. Lots of suggestions here. It is a warning, of course, that although the government says, you should feel comfortable standing or putting your suitcase on the right-hand side, or doing whatever, you'll get aggro for it. So what everyone, when they're looking at you weird, what they're saying is, hey buddy, you should be standing on the left, unless you're in Osaka, in which case you should be standing on the right. I don't know why. It's like a test to see if you're a real Osaka person. And I guess you can be beaten up just for not passing that test. So be careful. The quintessential Tokyo is taking all of our tax money and all of our people and is too cool and good looking, and we need to make it like less so that we can compete that the rest of the country has. More plans where the central government is going to be basically what do we have here? A 5-year regional revitalization plan released by the government is planning to basically have people move out of the greater Tokyo region, Tokyo as well as Saitama, Chiba, and Kanagawa. Of course, what this is talking about is the problem of the rest of the country depopulating and losing people. and both through not having children, and as well as not attracting people to come and move to their areas, as well as losing people, young people who often move to Tokyo for work and so on, which means that they're basically hollowing out most of rural Japan at the moment. And of course, politicians who come from disproportionately from rural areas and disproportionately, of course, in Japan, urban areas are underrepresented in Japan's politics. It's seen as a problem that so many people are moving away to the cities. So they try to come up with ways to incentivize people to stay in the country areas. And on the one hand, yes, of course, if you could work comfortably and enjoy quality of life in rural towns that you can in Tokyo, that's how they should compete. And they can't really compete because the whole reason that Tokyo is awesome is that it has 35 million people. And, from that, you get there's a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of opportunities and possibilities and so on. That's why people come here. And you're not really going to change that unless you have things like remote work that Japan's really kind of half-heartedly taken up. And, but yeah, the government's going to offer things like tax incentives and so on to basically try to make it cheaper and to offer benefits to people who choose to move away from Tokyo into rural areas. My view on this remains: the show is called Tokyo Tonight. Tokyo is winning by people voting with where they live, and using tax incentives as a way to attract people who in the end are going to end up paying more taxes back to these local areas to stop them getting hollowed out. I think they should compete on their merits. It shouldn't be a government policy to help dying rural towns. Basically, they should be attracting people from Tokyo on their own merits by making themselves attractive places to live, rather than bribing people from Tokyo to move out. I mean, look, if people are on the fence about moving to a rural area out of Tokyo, and this tips them over the edge, then I guess the goal of the policy will be achieved. But I really think that what they should be doing is making it so that that if you want to have a family, if you want to have childcare, that's going to be better. That taxes being cheaper, sure, that's great. If you want to have a job, you're not going to sacrifice salary. In fact, the idea that if you're able to enjoy a better quality of life in terms of earn the same money, not have a penalty for income, and have that go further with cheaper rent and cheaper food and everything, all those sorts of things. But yeah, better education, better facilities for kids, better parks, and no penalty on work or salary. That's how you draw people out of Tokyo. And that really requires the cooperation of companies, which isn't forthcoming at the moment. So we'll see what happens there. Ninjaru88, g'day, good to see you. Nice to see more people coming into the chat. Of course, remember, if you want to get my attention, do what DJ Sunnyside up there did. Just say my name, it'll flash up orange, and I will address any comment or question that you say. And do say hello if you're tuning in. It's always just nice to see where everyone's popping in from. And while you're here, don't forget, click on the like button. I really appreciate it. It's the only real thing that I do the show for. Also, the comments do help the show a lot as well. So I appreciate that. So yeah, good to see you, Ninja88. Next, I must admit, I've been going down a bit of a rabbit hole ever since Hope Doe, AI artist. An artist, not an AI artist, an artist, one of the many artists. And actually, I have artists in my family that I've seen online posting deep concern about lately realizing how developed and available now generative art AI is becoming. Of course, art is just one genre. There's music generative AI, there's code generative AI, there's chat and text generative AI. But a lot of the AIs that are beneath this, particularly things like OpenAI and Stable Diffusion and so on, lately they're really jumping ahead. And there's, of course, this race to develop what's called a general AI, an AI that can basically pretty much do anything, that you ask it to do, and adapt to anything, and be sort of trained to be good at specialist things, but also has an underlying capability of being able to do anything that a person does. And in the sort of arms race to develop this general AI, there have been these massive jumps lately by these sort of AI platforms, these preliminary AI engines, which are, of course, used by many apps to offer apps that will make these cool profile photos of you and stuff like that, as I've talked about in recent weeks. But one of the big ones, of course, is OpenAI's ChatGPT, which I think I've talked about as well. I've been chatting with it every night, and apparently it's getting overwhelmed at the moment. There's so many people sort of trying it out at the moment. And some interesting things with this as well. It's actually now getting so popular. And the thing is, all of these AI things, they rely on a ton of compute infrastructure to be able to work. They use huge data sets. They would need a lot of storage. They need a lot of CPU. They need a lot of caching. which means that they are expensive to host. And they take time, so it's not quite like the on-demand sort of AI that we would expect, like with the internet or electricity or something like that. But I can, all of a sudden, now that people are, now that it's more and more visible what these things are capable of doing and capable of becoming, and realizing, like with Moore's law, all the underlying, not just the underlying computing power continuing to go up exponentially, and the storage and everything else going up exponentially, but also these models learning, from people using it and improving as people using it. Now there are millions of people using it. And as the data sets improve and the capacity to analyze the data sets improve, and as people use it and help it improve the way that it improves on the data sets, and it's going up exponentially, it's going to get to a point, like an inflection point at a certain point, where it is going to be able to not only train and improve itself to get smarter, but also do all the things outside, like help build better machines, better computers that can, of course, itself help it compute faster and develop faster. And you're going to get this runaway super intelligent AI that theoretically could, of course, wipe all of humanity out and become sentient, but could also help enormously with things like medicine, with things like science, with pretty much anything. And it's causing a lot of discussions at the moment. Cold Fusion is just an awesome channel. They do like these 20-minute like deep dive videos on all sorts of topics. Very understandable, not too jargony, not too difficult to sort of follow. And they do a good summary of the state of AI. And I must admit, I do realize I wrote a blog about this. For some reason, I wasn't able to post the blog into my comments. But I do suggest it's time to pay attention to AI, ChatGPT, and beyond. This video I highly recommend. I think it's actually kind of mandatory viewing at the moment. Part of the reason I discuss this, hey, salutations, the J-Vlog. Part of the reason I'm discussing this is, I was I was in high school when the internet when people at school were using bulletin boards and I wasn't. I think the internet Netscape really came out in 1994 when I was like my second year at university. My first year at university, there was no internet to speak of to use for studying. You go to the library, you'd use CD-ROM libraries sometimes for some docs. When the internet came out, it was like, oh, this internet thing, this is going to be very useful. This is going to be very big. And I got into studying IT law, which in those days was literally like domain names and control of information on the internet. This was like pre-MP3s. I was using MP3s while I was still at university. I remember someone at my law firm asking me what I was listening to, and I said, MP3s that I downloaded. And they said, isn't that illegal? And then I went from there into working in corporate IT in my first job, where I was a system engineer, basically where implementing ERP systems, which are like these big integrated systems, where it used to be that you would have this big mainframe sort of 1970s system, one which would be dedicated for your order system, one that would be dedicated for your manufacturing system, one that would be for your procurement system. And what ERP did was it sort of had a more modern system that used networking to basically link everything together, so that when you got an order, it would automatically trigger a manufacture, or production order, which would automatically trigger the necessary purchase orders and stuff like that. So fully integrated. And what this meant also was that all of the information, which typically was siloed in all of these totally different computing systems, would all be linked together. And through what was called a business information warehouse, managers could actually see at any given time what was going on in a company, like snapshots, and not rely on monthly aggregated reports to track what was going on in their company. So I was part of this revolution about using computers to access information that was gathered up in companies, and sort of doing that. So first you had the internet, which was basically connecting people and allowing information to be sort of networked and joined together. ERP in a way was about making use of information which had previously been siloed. Then, like from the mid 2010s, of course, cloud became very big in enterprise, from earlier in that in startups. And what cloud was about was making the underlying technology that you need, basically the storage and computing power. It basically democratized it. It made it basically so that anybody, like for example, these chess teams that wanted to train on advanced AIs, could basically rent time on cloud servers to be able to access unlimited powerful, hyperscale computers and sort of mainframe style computers, and unlimited storage. And this is why we have Netflix and so on, that basically have all of this unlimited storage without owning data centers themselves. And so, all of these elements came together. And again, I've always sort of viewed this that the future world is going to be a progression of all of this technology and all of this information, sort of becoming sort of unlimited and connected, getting more and more useful for solving problems. But I must admit, while you keep hearing that AI is going to become this huge thing, I must admit, now I can sort of see how AI is going to become this just massive thing for, actually um, using all that unlimited technology and using that unlimited information to actually organize and problem solve as a utility, in the same way that we think of having a compute there. A compute there is just an underlying thing there that we have to use to make it useful for something. We have to use it to solve problems ourselves and think about what problems we want to solve. But AI is going to actually, and you can see it if you use ChatGPT. Whoa, am I losing my mirroring? Come back. Hang on a sec. That's crashed, so I'm going to reboot the screen mirroring. But yeah, it seems pretty clear to me that AI is just going to add another layer to that, where it's actually going to be like sort of on tap problem solving on demand, and any sort of problem that you want to solve, it's going to be there and able to solve, which is kind of nuts. Boom, there it goes. Okay, and we're back. So, yeah, and as I chat to it, and as I ask it, of course, right now, when you're talking with ChatGPT, you're not talking necessarily to what you'd think of as an anthropomorphized computer person or robot person that, does things. It's basically trained just to recognize when you trigger a certain topic, it will look for similar conversations or text on the internet that's addressing the topic that you're raising, and put together a sort of a simulated collection of text that is usually what this is associated with seeing as a typical response to that, which, without much data and without much training, just means it's just going to put out like gibberish. But it's getting pretty good now, like to the point where I've been having debates, like technical legal debates with it, and finding it's not A plus, but it's coherent and accurate. Like it's a solid B most of the time on stuff I do for work that I really think I could only have a conversation with a person about. For example, I was having a debate with it about categorization of cloud service technology, or about the difference between ukiyo and juninin contracts under Japanese law. And it wasn't hitting all the points that I wanted it to hit, but it was doing really good summaries. And I was even able to persuade it to change its mind on a few things. It can write movie scripts and stuff like that, but I can sort of see that, geez, I can get it to draft pretty good contract sections, at least as a first cut. I can get it to, like, coders are talking about, they can get it to write useful code that it can do to sketch out ideas. It can, start sketches of movie scripts. It can draw pictures. So yeah, I can really see how the idea that all of these competing platforms are not themselves going to be the applications. They are themselves going to be platforms that people are going to build applications on top of. But these things, as they become more powerful, and as you can see how quickly they're becoming so powerful that they're going to be able to basically do the lifting that normally, the part that after you have the computers and then you have the data and then you have some smart person makes software that puts all that together in some way, and then you have a user that decides how to use that. This is going to be as a utility, like stacked on top of all of that. And it's really fundamentally going to change. It's already changing so much. So it's already causing me to realize that what I thought the IT revolution is different, and is going to be different, and is going to be more rapid. And all the implications of that, how disruptive that's going to be for society, the fact that regulators already are behind on it, and fundamentally don't understand the technology, and what I thought was coming in a couple of years from now, I now think is different. So, I've seen all these tech fads about quantum computing, which is honestly still a ways off, although maybe this is a way that gets accelerated. NFTs and crypto and so on. And honestly, I haven't really gotten on the train for, any of these things. Mildly interested in AR, not interested in VR, not interested in the metaverse, not interested in crypto, not interested in NFTs. But this is crazy. As someone who's worked in IT for 20 years and is working on cutting edge stuff at the moment, Yeah, this is the next train. I'm sort of excited because honestly, I think we've been digesting some of this new technologies that we've been dealing with for the last 5 or 6 years, and this is genuinely new. So I feel very excited about that. So I'm loving reading about that at the moment. Kerberos Tenchi, yeah, well, that's exactly. You could totally ask it to do a multi Python script. I haven't tried it, but I must admit, for example, I asked it the other day, do a daily summary of. I think I did something like, okay, explain AI to me. Explain controversies around AI as a Philip DeFranco vlog script. And it literally like did it like a Philip DeFranco vlog script, like like the regular intro and the way that he phrases it, everything. So he must have scripts on the internet that it learned from. I then asked, do a Hiko Simon script, and it didn't. It just gave a sort of a generic script. But just again, it's amazing what these things can do. So you should definitely play around with it and think about, geez, this is literally going to be able to, in some way, automate. Even things that we thought were safe from being automated, like creative things. This is going to automate, which doesn't mean it's going to necessarily get rid of everything. It's just going to give us the ability to again go. I'll do a lot further. A single person is going to be able to do a lot more, and I think it's going to be able to make us more creative. It's going to be able to make more people more creative. And output more and do more. And what do we do with that extra capacity? Just like, it's basically the difference between having an 18-wheeler truck and a donkey and a cart. It's going to give us, it's basically going to give us the capacity to cover a lot more ground with a lot more stuff. And it's going to be really, really exciting when we start applying that to all of the problems of the world, how far we get. So I'm very, very excited about it. Quint Rankid, when you discuss these things and the subject changes, do I ever ask it to recall what it said about the previous subject? No, although a couple of subjects I've now gone so far with the chats, it says, hey, you're freaking me out and I've had to start a new chat. I have gotten it to change its mind. So you know what? I have gone back. I haven't asked it about previous subjects. I've triggered a new subject sometimes, but there have been subjects, 10%, I'll get through. There have been subjects where, for example, it told me something I disagreed with, and I set up a logical counter argument to it, where I kind of got it to admit that it was wrong, but it did, and it changed its position, and it acknowledged what it previously said, but what I said is also true, so I guess that you can be right. So that was pretty interesting. And again, this is all just simulated, this is literally learning patterns of text, but it was pretty cool. So yeah, December Cloud is late to the party as always, but as always, good to have you in the chat, and thank you for joining. Yeah, I summarized this next story as Nagasaki politician apologizes for living the dream that we all dare not live out ourselves. Of course, he was drunk and he was on a train and he saw the what could easily be mistaken for, of course, the gymnastics rings from the Olympics. We've all thought it. Occasionally, we've even done it to a degree, but apparently he decided, God, that ad is annoying, isn't it? Go away. There we go. A Nagasaki politician. There he goes. Look at him go. What a champion. So, he lived the dream for all of us. He went out there and did the full Sasuke Olympics thing. 27 years old, Nagasaki representative, and he that's him apologizing for doing it, saying he was so drunk he doesn't remember. But I would say he doesn't look like he was that drunk. I say congrats to the guy. Yeah, well, let's face it, we've all thought about doing this sometime, and so props. I find it hard to get too angry at that guy for too long. Another big story that's been happening this week, if you've been following the news, is, of course, Japan's been talking about basically with all of NATO and many countries now are realizing. See, one thing, I love it, partly because I'm a contrarian. I'm a lawyer by training. I just like disagreeing with people. And one thing I'll point out is that, always, you got to hate the ideas, not the person. And you have to acknowledge when a bad person has a good idea. And the thing is, if you were to tell me to come up with a thing, as much as I think that Trump was a terrible person and not fit to be president of any country or even like a school board or council, so I don't like him as a person, and I disagree with a lot of his politics and a lot of his ideas, but doesn't mean I disagree with all of them. And I give Trump credit for a lot of good things that he did, or at least the good things that were done under his presidency. And and he made arguments which a lot of people saw him as being like just antagonistic and horrible, saying that NATO countries were relying too much on America for their defense and not pulling their weight on defense spending, where all NATO countries had committed to a minimum spending on defense. And most of them were ignoring that, and in fact were continuing to cut back. And of course, he put it in a horrible way, saying, "Well, we're gonna start paying, charging protection money if you don't actually fund your own militaries and pull your own weight." And Europeans were saying, "Oh, this is just Americans being antagonistic and horrible." But he was kind of right. And as soon as the Ukraine war happened, now everybody's kind of realizing that he was right. Now all of a sudden, all these NATO countries are actually increasing defense spending to the commitment levels that they had already made to NATO. Japan has always spent up to its an agreed amount, like 1.5% of GDP. I think it's always been an unofficial sort of limit that it's set on spending. But it was a milestone this year that Japan, wanting to be seen as also staying in step with NATO and the US, announced that it is increasing its own defense spending to 2% of GDP. This was it highlighted primarily in response to China, but no question it's also in response to Russia and in response to of course, North Korea and so on as well. But more or less, it's also just making sure that it's not solely relying on America. I mean, you take right now, America's pretty much sending all the artillery shells, and it's sending a lot of hardware into Ukraine that's getting used up at the moment, which probably would be a strain on resources if America was suddenly to get into another conflict somewhere at the moment, like, for example, defending Japan. America's, basically since the 1950s. I mean, America wanted Japan to, do what Korea did and send troops to Vietnam, to which Japan said, yeah, we'd really love to send lots of people to Vietnam to fight for America. But America wrote this constitution that says we're not allowed to do it, so our hands are tied. And America was like, no, don't worry about that. We wrote that. We didn't mean that. No, please, you can send people to Vietnam. And Japan was like, yeah, we really want to, but nah, we can't. We're really sorry, but you have to defend us. And thank you. We really appreciate it. So Japan's kind of done well off this, but partly out of worrying about, particularly if you get more isolation as president. Another thing I credit Trump for that I don't think he gets any credit for, but he deserves, is, Obama said that he was going to pull US troops out of Afghanistan and out of all of these other conflicts and didn't. And yeah, you might say that it was a mess and it was rushed and whatever, but Trump followed through, where basically everybody else kind of lied about it and dragged their feet. And, there were some negative consequences of that, but I credit him for keeping his promise. And I think it's a good thing for a leader to prioritize saving the lives of their own citizens. And so this is sort of another thing where, at the same time, where just as America is entitled to do it, decides to not have its people die in other countries so much, those other countries are obligated to step up and fill the gap, particularly where it's for their own benefit. And in this light as well, I think it is good news that Japan is looking to. I think what the Ukraine war has done is it's made those threats where we all kind of hoped that wars weren't really going to happen anymore. We're now learning that's not the world that we live in as much as we wish it was, and it's making Japan and a lot of other countries take their defense spending and commitments more seriously all over again. Of course, the problem is that while Japan wants to signal that it's in the gang, it's not in NATO, but like NATO, it's going to increase its defense spending. Within Japan, there's two big problems to this. The first problem is, of course, well, day and age, the Japanese students did go crazy, and they didn't even have to go to Vietnam, and they went crazy. That period of time, that's when the Japanese Red Army, that's when the Japanese university campuses were shut down in terrorism and bombings and violence, and they didn't even have to go to Vietnam. You're right, it would have been unthinkable, actually. I mean, the Constitution really did Japan a solid over Vietnam, but even without having to go to Vietnam, Japan went completely nuts during that time period. But coming back, there's two big problems. The first problem is the problem that these protesters are mainly concerned about, which is Article 9, under Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, which officially was written by Japanese people and passed by Japanese Parliament, and I think, when was it, 1953? It was before 1953, perhaps. But basically, everyone knows it was a rush assignment handed to some sort of junior staffers in MacArthur's office, and they had to do it in less than a week. It was written in English and translated into Japanese. And it's a unique constitution that most constitutions are not written that the state is not permitted to do this, the state is not permitted to do this, but it was basically an imposed constitution of things that the Japanese government must never do again. And one of the things is Japan forever renounces its right to resolve international disputes through use of force, and will never maintain air, sea, or air, land, or sea forces for military purposes. And so you might ask, well, so how is it that Japan has the third highest military spending of any country in the world? And the answer is that Japan doesn't have a military. Japan has self-defense forces, which looks like a military, but basically there are a couple of definitions of military which the Japanese self-defense forces don't meet. One is that militaries are supposed to have independent logistics, which can basically survive independent of civilian logistics networks for fuel and food and so on. Japanese self-defense forces, of course, are integrated with civilian logistics infrastructure, the idea being that they can only function if they're in Japan and they can't function abroad. Of course, this is something, logistics is what militaries do. So, it's something that they could adapt, and they could figure out how to have real, genuine military style logistics if they needed to. I'm sure they have manuals all hidden away somewhere to do that if they ever wanted to go invading somewhere, but they don't have real logistics. Another thing is that they don't have the ability to project, just like at the moment. America could be giving Ukraine missiles that can travel 1,000 kilometers and hit targets all over Russia, but they're deliberately only giving them short-range weapons with a range of up to 100 kilometers, like HIMARS and so on. And they're doing this deliberately because they don't want them to be able to be too aggressive or to use that to invade or trigger expanded war with Russia. The Japanese military buys these long-range US aircraft and weapon systems and so on, but because it wants everyone to understand that these are not for aggressive purposes, they disable them. They take the fuel tanks off the F-16s that they buy, the F-18s and so on that they own, and they put these smaller fuel tanks on that reduce the range. Now, again, all they have to do, if they wanted to become a military, is just put the regular standard fuel tanks back on the planes. But just basically everything that they spend the money to buy everything, and then they spend extra money to make it worse, so that it can only be used for defensive purposes by reducing the range and independent capability of everything that they have. So this is what makes it interesting, that this doctrine that they're talking about changing, they're not talking about changing towards a defensive posture or the ability to, for example, go and operate on mainland Asia or anything like that. But they are talking about, for the first time, having the capability to strike or counter-strike enemy bases. The idea being that if missiles are launched from China or North Korea or Russia, Japan should have the ability to be able to launch missiles back that will reach those bases in China, but not for the purpose of attacking, only for the purpose of counter-attacking. Although, of course, there are doctrines of defense that say that if you know that there are missiles being fueled up in China that are going to be fired at Japan, Japan could theoretically counter-strike in advance. So, the question of what constitutes defense or a counterstrike is partly up to semantics and definitions, but this is basically where Japan is looking at changing its definition of defense to allow it to be a little bit more offensive. And a lot of people pointing out that, the interpretation of the Constitution to even allow defense forces in the first place, which clearly contradicts the plain reading of the Constitution as it currently is. There's a lot of people in Japan who think that Japan shouldn't even have self-defense forces. So that's the first problem that you have. And Japan's now talking, really without any public debate, that it's actually going to change that interpretation to be even more generous towards allowing themselves to do stuff. And a lot of people are saying, this is militarization all over again, which it's not. Japan still doesn't have a normal military by any international definition of military. It's not Costa Rica, but it's kind of in between, and like New Zealand and Costa Rica in terms of the position and spending on its military forces. This is more like an armed Coast Guard, a really, really, really well-equipped armed Coast Guard at the moment with lots of stuff. But again, some people think Japan shouldn't have guns at all or whatever. But and those are the people protesting. That's the first half of the problem. The second half of the problem is that, okay, well, where are you going to get the money from? Japan has I think just about the highest debt per person ratio of any country in the developed world, more than Greece, more than countries that have gone bankrupt. They are collecting every year. They collect less taxes than they spend. So how are they suddenly going to dramatically increase defense spending by 200 billion or whatever the amount is? And what they said is that they're going to redirect, they're going to increase the corporate tax, they are going to increase cigarette taxes, and they are going to redirect funds that are being used for the rebuilding of Fukushima. When that runs out, the temporary Fukushima reconstruction taxes that are coming currently out of income taxes, they're going to redirect those into defense spending. And they announced that, and they said that like they're going to do that in a week. And remember, every time the Japanese government's increased the sales tax, which they're not touching this time, they've been voted out. So Japanese are very, very sensitive to tax increases, and this is being done very rapidly and without very much debate. So much so, pardon me, that a lot of nervous LDP politicians are saying, let's just hold this back a year, just that we can get everyone on board that we're not going to get destroyed in the next election based on suddenly increasing taxes, especially like they were increasing the sales tax previously to increase things like for medical care, social welfare spending, things that people sort of needed. The idea that they could justify a tax hike for military spending, which a large percentage of the population doesn't even agree that Japan should have in the first place, it's controversial within Japan, but I personally, I think it's something that Japan should do. I mean, my view is Japan should have, or Japan is at least entitled to have a normal military at this point. It's been a relatively well-behaved nation state for 70 years, and it is dealing with outright aggression on the northern border, where it still has islands that are occupied by Russia, and Russia doing shenanigans, like doing exercises and shows of strength and threatening Japan up in the north, and China claiming islands that Japan occupies in the south. And Japan, again, where China and Korea and Russia fortify the islands that they occupy that are in disputes. They have military forces on them. They put fortifications on them. Japan is being all nicey nice. It hasn't fortified, in fact, bans Japanese people from landing on the Senkaku Islands. No buildings or facilities on them whatsoever, which basically just makes them free for the grabbing if China ever wants to grab them. But Japan basically wants to not do anything to upset China. So Japan's actually playing really nice by these standards, and I think it should just go and do what everyone else does and just make it so that nobody even thinks about the idea of grabbing those islands. But instead of that, what they're doing is they're building up their capability that if China does grab those islands, that Japan could defend them or fight back. I think make it so that you can't grab them in the first place is the better alternative for everybody, frankly. But that is what's currently going on. So it's probably more controversial for the tax element. Most people generally agree that China and Russia are acting weird and aggressive, and Japan should be properly defended. Although even Japan's right to defend itself is controversial within Japan. I wouldn't say a majority. I'd say it is a minority of people in Japan, but a significant minority. If you take sort of Socialist Party and Communist Party voters, I'd say people who believe that under the current constitution, Japan shouldn't even have a self-defense forces are probably around 10%. And people who think that the current SDF forces shouldn't be expanded in terms of their ability to attack and participate is probably close to 50%. Japanese don't want to deal with, even on UN peacekeeping, they don't want to deal with Japanese getting killed. So, yeah. Hey, Eric Bailey, no problem. I did unblock you, and yes, I think they're definitely taking the advice there on taxing young people. Just going back into the chat, let's go back and see what people are saying. We've got Dan H. The Japanese students would have gone crazy. Yes, they would have. The 2% of GDP, and if I understood correctly, 2 times the military size. Not quite 2 times, but it's definitely, I think it's been up to 1.5% in the past. It's a significant increase. At least in spending. They're not going to increase the number of people joining it. But yeah, Kubri's Tenchi, pulling out of a country after 20-something years is nothing to take lightly. It's like moving out of a house after 20 years. There's a lot to prepare, and in the end, it went quite wrong. Afghanistan, yes, indeed. But they couldn't stay there forever. In the end of the day, and this is the thing. I actually think that's something I think that Trump was right to do. And honestly, I think Obama should have done it before Trump even came in. Eric Bailey, I'm sorry that we started without you, but it's good to have you now that you're here. Kubri's Tenchi, you're thinking about applying as an aircraft mechanic with the Japanese self-defense forces, especially specifically Blue Impulse. It would be cool, but not sure if it's actually possible. Kubri's Tenchi, you have to be a Japanese citizen to work as a Japanese civil servant, which Japan self-defense forces are. Blue Impulse is pretty cool, and I suspect you'd have to renounce your citizenship. I believe your German citizenship, and become Japanese. And I'm not sure even then with military, you might have to pass some background checks for certain roles in the military. Blue Impulse should be fine. You can do it, but you'd have to change your citizenship. That's the thing. Counter Strikes. Everyone read Clausewitz now. I don't know Clausewitz, so makes me think of the old video game, but that's me. Cobra essentially quite similar to Germany, except your self-defense forces could only defend Germany for 2 days until it runs out of ammo. Yeah, well, everybody's getting some practice supplying Ukraine at the moment. I mean, it's kind of horrible in a way that they're able to use Ukraine as a training ground, but that's what's happening. I think I've mentioned in previous weeks that this series on extra credits, The Path to Pearl Harbor, is excellent. I'll actually go so far now. Episode 4 came out like today, and it is the best history of the build-up to Pearl Harbor and how it happened. 4 episodes, and it's gripping, it's entertaining, and it teaches me a bunch of stuff I've never heard before, and it's excellent storytelling. Yeah, this is the best, like, Japanese, like, most interesting telling of this really interesting episode of Japanese history that you've ever heard. And what I love about this last 4th episode is it spends a lot of time talking about the debates between the Japanese prime minister, who wanted to remain allies with the US right until like midway through 1941, and the factions in the military, and even within the diplomatic corps that were opposed to him, and the raging debates that were going on within the Japanese government as to whether they should, agree to US terms. America was willing to let Japan have Manchuria and militarize if they just would stop invading and free them from oil sanctions, if they would just pull out of China and stop like invading everybody. And the Japanese prime minister, wanted to agree to that. But the military faction was already set to go on going south and trying to get oil from Indonesia. So they basically forced the prime minister to resign and change plans, and decided to go attack America to give them time to go and invade Indonesia and secure oil. But right up to the last minute, it was like Japan could have actually gone into the war as an ally of America, like even into like mid 1941. So it's really fascinating history. Anyway, well worth watching. Again, everybody very happy that Japan's going to be spending more on defense. They've been asking for it for a long time, and Japan does spend a lot on defense. But when this goes through, it's going to be like the 3rd highest spending country in the world, which will be good reminding to countries like Russia just not to mess with Japan or try anything on. The Master, hey, good to have you in here. You must work on your Tokyo Tonight attendance. It's good to have you in here. And by the way, just to everybody, a quick reminder, if you are liking the video and you appreciate the show, please click on the like button. I do appreciate it. And if you are watching, don't just lurk. Say hello. It's nice to see where people are from and just to see people in there. Cobra Tenchi would renounce your German citizenship in an instant. You know that the Blue Angels and well as the Thunderbirds do have civilian contractors. So you're hoping that JASDF does too. It's possible, but I think if you want to work for the Japanese Self-Defense Forces or any type of bureaucrat, frankly, in Japanese, as a civil servant, you have to be a Japanese citizen. But you should look it up. I don't think it's impossible. So there's a Counter-Strike thing. And actual final story there as well. We're having an App Store moment, as I talked about in the beginning, that generative AI and ChatGPT are kind of becoming technologies that I don't think these are fads or buzz things. This is not the metaverse. This is not, these are not NFTs. This is something I think is going to really, really change our society in the way that the internet did, in the way that the cloud has. I think it's on that scale. I'm very excited about it. I'm reading a ton about it at the moment. Legally, it's interesting. Technologically, it's interesting. It's a great time to be going to America, going to Seattle and a tech company, actually. I'm probably going to be trying to learn a ton about this when I'm over there. So, yeah, I'm very excited about that and tracking this just because I'm into that sort of a thing. Time is up on the show. I really did. I'm all set up over here to do some outro music. Problem is that I can't get the computer to recognize my audio input at the moment. Let me just quickly see. Tell me if you can hear anything, but I don't think the audio is coming through on this. Let me just try it once, and if not, I guess maybe I'll do a Christmas live music show. Let's see how we go. Boom. So let's do a new. Okay. Okay. Sound up. So you can't hear anything right now, right? That is such a bummer that is not working. What if I flip all the mutes? Okay, I think I've got to look at my computer audio settings. So I will do that later. I won't be able to do that today. Anyway, I'm coming up on an hour. So look, have a good week, everybody. Have a good Christmas coming up in the next week. I might not be here for Christmas next week. I think I might be, but if I'm not, happy Christmas to everybody. However you spend it, or if you don't spend it, whatever, you take advantage of whatever holidays or whatever are going on instead. Have a happy end of year. I think I'll do one more show for the end of year next week, or before the end of the year. But look, everybody stay safe. Thank you for keeping me company as always. I do appreciate it. And yeah, DJ Sunny Side Up. I've got to check out my audio setup, but that's a feature of the show. Good morning, Seattle. It is going to become Good Morning Seattle, isn't it? I guess I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited. It'll be a few months, but yeah. Crypto Airy, thank you for joining. Mogberry Pie, Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for saying hello. Thanks for everyone for jumping in and keeping me company. Do remember to like the video. Have a good week. Stay safe. Remember, meet up in Tokyo midday on January 21st, somewhere in Roppongi. More information to come. Look out for that if you're in Tokyo or coming to Tokyo. Would love to see you and say hello. I'll try to figure out a good system so I can say hello to as many people as possible for that. And yeah, smash the like button. Have a good week. Boom. Peace. And check out the World Cup final. Who am I supporting for that? Argentina or France? I'm kind of supporting France, I guess. Everyone's kind of supporting Messi at the moment. I don't know. I'll just watch it and see which team I like the best. Have a good week. See you later. Ending stream.